Welcome to another deep dive.
Mhm.
Have you ever been walking through a brightly lit shopping mall in late December?
Oh, yeah.
Or, perhaps sitting in a velvet-lined seat at a symphony hall, and you hear a piece of classical Christmas music that has this very specific, swaying, almost hypnotic rhythm to it.
That really distinctive rocking back and forth.
Exactly. It just sort of rocks. And without even consciously realizing it, your brain immediately says, yes, wintertime, shepherds in a field, angels.
Right.
Have you ever stopped to wonder where that highly specific, almost universally recognized musical vibe actually came from?
That's a great question.
Today, we're taking a look at a single, incredibly fascinating Wikipedia article all about a musical genre called the Pastoral. And our mission for this deep dive is to uncover something that feels almost like a historical heist.
A heist is a good word for it.
We are going to explore how the rustic, everyday street music of freezing Italian bagpipers secretly infiltrated the absolute greatest hits of the Baroque and classical eras, and how it still fundamentally dictates the music you hear today.
It is a genuine pleasure to be exploring this with you, because we really aren't just looking at, dry music theory or dusty sheet music today. We are looking at a fascinating cultural bridge. We're examining this incredible historical through line between humble, everyday shepherds playing to keep warm in the fields and the high art composers writing for the grandest courts, kings, and cathedrals in Europe.
It's wild to think about.
It really is. It's a story of how a raw, earthy folk tradition was essentially captured in amber by classical music, preserving the sound of the streets inside the concert hall.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start right at the foundation.
Let's do it.
The anatomy of a pastoral. What exactly is it we are listening to? The Wikipedia article defines the pastoral at its core as music that evokes a pastoral nature.
Right, the countryside.
Yeah, it's meant to conjure the rural life, the agrarian ideal. That can come across in its strict formal structure or just its overall mood. But structurally, if we look at the Baroque pastoral, it has some very specific mechanical requirements.
Very specific.
We are told it features a melody moving in thirds, and it is played over something called a drone bass.
Yes.
Now, for the listener who might just enjoy listening to music but doesn't read sheet music every day, can you explain what a drone bass actually is conceptually?
Absolutely. Think of a drone bass as a musical anchor. Conceptually, it is a steady, continuous, unchanging, underlying note that just holds constantly at the very bottom of the music.
Like it never moves at all.
Never moves, it never shifts chords, it doesn't follow the complex harmonic progressions you might normally expect in classical music. It just sits there, humming along, creating a sonic floor.
Okay.
And what that does is it entirely grounds the melody happening above it. So you have this long, sustained, unmoving note at the bottom, and above it you have a melody moving in thirds.
And what exactly does moving in thirds sound like to the human ear?
It means the notes of the melody are harmonized at a specific interval, a third apart,
Right.
which produces a sound that is incredibly sweet, parallel, and consonant. There's no harsh tension there.
Got it.
So you have this droning, earthy floor and this incredibly sweet, swaying melody dancing right on top of it. It perfectly mimics the actual physical mechanics of a bagpipe.
Oh, because of the pipes themselves.
Exactly. A bagpipe literally has drone pipes that play a constant, unyielding note, while the player fingers a separate complex melody on a different pipe called the chanter. The classical composers were literally writing orchestral music to sound like a piece of wood and leather.
That is a fascinating acoustic trick. You have an entire section of cellos or double basses just imitating a leather bag full of air.
Yeah, pretty much.
And the article gives us the specific time signatures that create the swaying feeling. Pastorals are generally written in 68, 98, or 128 meter and played at a moderate tempo.
What's fascinating here is how that specific time signature connects to another deeply famous Italian style of music, the Tarantella.
Oh, wow.
Now, you might know the Tarantella as that frenetic, wildly fast, almost chaotic Italian folk dance.
Right. The legend is that the Tarantella was danced to cure the bite of a tarantula spider. So it is incredibly rapid. It's supposed to make you sweat the venom out.
Exactly. But the Pastoral is essentially a slowed-down version of that exact same Tarantella.
Really?
Yes. It encompasses many of the exact same rhythms and melodic phrases, but it pulls them back to that moderate, gentle tempo. It takes that frantic, galloping rhythm and turns it into a peaceful, rocking lullaby.
Wait, let me push back on that for a second. So they took a frantic, chaotic dance, meant to cure a venomous spider bite and just hit the slow motion button?
Basically, yeah.
Does that actually work musically, or does it just sound like a vinyl record playing at the wrong speed?
It works brilliantly, and it has to do with the psychology of rhythm. When you play a 68 rhythm at a breakneck speed, it feels like galloping horses or a pounding heartbeat. It induces adrenaline.
Right, panic mode.
But when you have that tempo, the exact same mathematical subdivision suddenly mimics the rocking of a cradle or the gentle swaying of wheat in a field or a shepherd slowly walking. It changes from inducing panic to inducing deep relaxation.
That completely reframes how I hear those rhythms.
Yeah.
So that gives us the what of the Pastoral, the slow, swaying, bagpipe imitating lullaby. Let's move into the where and the who.
The roots of it all.
Because this music didn't just appear out of thin air in the middle of a Venetian concert hall, it was directly inspired by a very specific group of people, the Pifferari.
Yes.
These were the players of traditional Italian bagpipes, and their rural Christmas music was the direct inspiration for this entire genre. Imagine being a wealthy aristocrat in Rome or Naples in the 17th century.
Sitting in your palazzo.
Right. During the Christmas season, these rural shepherds would come down from the hills and into the cities, playing this deeply traditional, rustic music right on the cold streets.
And we have to understand why the urban elites were so captivated by this.
Right. Why did they care?
There was a massive socioeconomic divide. The wealthy aristocrats and the elite composers of the Baroque era lived highly structured, rigidly formal lives. To them, these freezing, dirt-poor shepherds represented the pastoral ideal.
Ah, romanticizing the simple life.
Exactly. It was a highly sanitized obsession. They heard this raw, piercing street music and didn't just hear peasants, they heard a connection to nature, to antiquity, and to an uncorrupted way of living.
And the instruments those shepherds were playing are crucial to understanding the sound the classical composers were trying to mimic. The article specifically details two instruments.
Right.
First is the Zampogna, which is the traditional Italian bagpipe. This is the instrument providing that continuous humming groan bass we talked about, along with the melody.
Right.
But the Zampogna was very often accompanied by a second instrument, the piffero, which is the namesake of the Pifferari players themselves.
And the piffero is a truly remarkable piece of musical history to dissect. It is described as a primitive, keyless, double reed oboe type instrument.
Can we break down what double reed actually means for the sound? Because when we think of classical woodwinds today, we think of very smooth, polished, silver-keyed instruments.
It is the exact opposite of smooth and polished.
Yeah.
Unlike a flute, where you blow gently over a hole, or a clarinet that uses a single reed against a mouthpiece, a double reed is literally two pieces of stiff cane tied together. When you blow through them, they vibrate violently against each other.
Oh, wow.
It creates a buzzing, piercing tone. Think of the harsh nasal sound of a duck call. And because the piffero is keyless, the player is just covering wooden holes directly with their bare fingers. It is a rugged, outdoor instrument specifically designed to be loud enough to cut right through howling winter winds across a mountain valley.
A duck call cutting through the winter wind. That is such a vivid auditory image. And depending on where you are in Italy, this instrument goes by quite a few regional names.
Yes, it does.
The Wikipedia article notes it is also commonly called a sciaramella, a pepita, or a bifera. And it is so important to point out that this is not just an archaeological dig into dead history.
Not at all.
We aren't talking about a forgotten practice from hundreds of years ago. This music is still alive. You can travel to the regions of southern Italy today where the Zampogna continues to thrive.
You really can.
You can still hear a solo Zampogna player or one accompanied by that piercing piffero, keeping this exact same unbroken musical tradition alive in the streets.
It is a living, breathing tradition that has survived centuries. And that survival is exactly what makes the next part of our deep dive so compelling.
Right.
Because we have to look at how that living, gritty, street-level tradition got scooped up and polished by the most elite musical minds in European history.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We are talking about the classical mega hits.
The big ones.
The absolute rock star composers of the Baroque and classical eras essentially hijacked this bagpipe vibe and made it the centerpiece of their masterworks. We are talking about pieces of music that define Western culture.
Truly.
There is the last movement of Arcangelo Corelli's Christmas Concerto, Opus 6, number 8. There is the third movement of Antonio Vivaldi's Spring Concerto.
The Four Seasons.
Yes, from the legendary Four Seasons. And there is the Pifa movement from George Friedrich Handel's Messiah. Right in the middle of these monumental, highly sophisticated compositions, you suddenly have full-string sections mimicking the drone and the duck call sound of Italian shepherds.
It really is staggering when you consider the cultural weight of those pieces. Think about Vivaldi's Spring. You have all this high art Venetian violin mastery, but the third movement is literally a pastoral dance.
Yeah.
The lower strings are holding that bagpipe drone, and the upper strings are playing that swaying, simple shepherd's melody. But the most profound application of this has to be from Johann Sebastian Bach.
Okay, tell me more about that, because we usually think of Bach as the ultimate master of complex mathematical counterpoint, not simple peasant music.
Exactly, which makes his use of the pastoral so striking. He utilized the pastoral form in some highly specific, deeply theological ways. He wrote a standalone pastoral, BWV 590, for the organ, which is beautiful.
Right.
But the crucial example is the Sinfonia that opens part 2 of his massive Christmas Oratorio. Bach uses this specific pastoral form, that swaying 128-meter, the unmoving drone, the parallel thirds, as the direct musical introduction to the angelic announcement to the shepherds.
So he is setting a scene.
It is more than just setting a scene. It is a profound theological statement. By bringing the gritty, recognizable music of street-level bagpipers into the pristine environment of a grand German church, Bach is musically demonstrating that the divine message of the Christmas story was delivered to the lowest, poorest rungs of society first.
That is incredible.
He is using the shepherd's own musical language to validate them before the choir of angels even begins to sing. It is an incredibly brilliant narrative and cultural device.
He is basically creating a cinematic soundscape with a social message built into the sheet music.
Exactly.
If you want the aristocratic audience in the pews to instantly picture freezing shepherds in a field at night, you just play the bagpipe music they hear on the streets, but you play it on a massive church organ or a full orchestra.
It's genius.
And this viral trend didn't stop with the Baroque era. The Wikipedia article shows how this transitions seamlessly into the classical era and beyond. We have Domenico Scarlatti writing pastorales directly into his keyboard sonatas. We have the French composer Marc-Antoine Charpentier, who completely obsessed over this technique.
Charpentier is a fascinating case because he represents how this Italian street music merged with refined French compositional techniques. He didn't just dabble in the pastoral, he wrote 8 massive separate sets of them. He recognized that the French courts, much like the Italian elites, were absolutely infatuated with the pastoral ideal.
And speaking of bringing it into the modern concert hall, we have to talk about Gioacchino Rossini. Fast forward a bit, and Rossini famously slips a massive pastoral section right into the middle of his iconic William Tell overture.
Oh, yeah.
Most people know that piece of music for the galloping, adrenaline-fueled Lone Ranger theme at the very end. But right before that chaotic finale, Rossini deliberately gives the audience a peaceful, swaying pastoral scene, usually featuring a solo English horn or flute over a drone.
It's beautiful.
He uses the tranquility of the shepherd's music to make the explosion of the finale feel that much more intense. It just goes to show how enduring and versatile this musical shortcut was for composers.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains so much about our modern everyday relationship with holiday music. Because you might be wondering why this very specific 68 Italian bagpipe rhythm is something you instantly associate so heavily with winter and Christmas today.
Yeah, why is that so hardwired into us?
It isn't just because Bach and Handel used it. It is because those early Pifferaris were specifically playing Christmas music in the streets. And that association carried all the way through history into some of the most popular Italian Christmas carols ever written.
Right, the holiday soundtrack. The article highlights a massively popular Italian Christmas carol called Duscendi dalle Stelle,
which is appropriately translated as the Carol of the Bagpipers, or in the original Neapolitan, Canzoni di Zampogna.
I love that.
It was written by St. Alfonso Liguori,
Yeah.
and it perfectly encapsulates that swaying pastoral feel. And we also have another classic mentioned, Pietro Jan's Gesù Bambino. These are the specific melodies that cemented that rocking 68 rhythm into our collective holiday consciousness over the last century. When you hear that rocking meter in a modern Christmas song, your brain is reacting to a centuries-old tradition of street performance.
Okay, I totally get Germany and France adopting this. The courts were connected, the composers studied each other, but did this trend hit a geographic limit? I mean, how far could an Italian bagpipe rhythm really travel before it stopped making sense to the culture?
This is where we get one of those fantastic historical quirks that you just have to marvel at. because it didn't stop in Central Europe. They traveled all the way to Scandinavia.
And this is exactly what I found so wild in the reading. In 1790, the Swedish poet and performer Carl Michael Bellman published a famous song collection called Fredman's Epistles.
Yes.
And right there in this 18th century Swedish collection of tavern songs and poetry, you find several pastorals. The article specifically details a song called Liksom en herdina, högtidsklädd, which translates to like a shepherdess, solemnly dressed. And the most absurd part, this Swedish song begins as a near paraphrase of a completely different source, Nicolas Boileau de Pro's French Guide to the Construction of Pastoral Verse.
It is a stunning, almost comical example of cross-cultural pollination. Think about the chain of events here. You have an Italian street music tradition played by freezing peasants,
Right.
which is formalized by elite German and French high art composers who are heavily utilizing French poetry guides to ensure they get the rustic vibe exactly right. And then that French poetry guide is adapted by a Swedish poet for a song collection meant to be sung in the taverns of Stockholm in 1790.
It is the ultimate musical game of telephone. From a wooden pipe in a field in Naples, to a French poetry textbook, to a Swedish drinking song. It shows how the idea of the pastoral, the deep human desire to capture that simple, rustic shepherd life, was universally appealing across all of Europe, regardless of the language or the snowy geography.
Exactly. It wasn't about the actual reality of being a poor shepherd. It was about the feeling that the music evoked. Peace, simplicity, and a connection to the earth.
So, what does this all mean? As we look back over all of this history, the grand synthesis here is just how powerful a simple, honest sound can be.
Beautifully put.
An incredibly specific, gritty sound from the fields of southern Italy, just a continuous humming drone bass and some rocking, harmonized thirds played on a piece of cane, literally conquered the elite concert halls of Europe. It became the ultimate, universally understood shortcut for any composer wanting to evoke nature, angels, peace, and shepherds.
And that is the true, lasting value of understanding this history. It completely changes how you listen to the world around you.
It really does.
The next time you are listening to a playlist of holiday music, or the next time you are sitting in a symphony hall taking in a grand Baroque masterpiece by Bach or Vivaldi, I urge you to keep your ears open.
Pay attention to the bass.
Yes, when the music suddenly shifts into that swaying 68 or 128 time, and you hear that low, humming drone bass anchoring the melody at the bottom of the orchestra, I want you to realize what is actually happening. You are not just hearing abstract notes on a page written by a wealthy genius in a wig.
No.
You are hearing the ghosts of Italian bagpipers. You are hearing the Pifferari playing their primitive, keyless pifferos in the cold winter air, trying to keep their fingers warm.
It fundamentally changes the whole way you experience the music. You start hearing the dirt, the wood, and the breath beneath all those shiny violins.
You do. And this raises an important question. We've seen how the highest, most respected art music of the Baroque and classical eras was heavily borrowing from and formalizing the raw, everyday street music of Italian bagpipers.
Right.
The composers took the gritty folk music of their time and elevated it into untouchable masterpieces.
Ah, that's interesting.
What beats or rhythms are currently bouncing around in hip-hop or underground electronic dance music or regional folk styles that will quietly become the revered, highly structured high art of the future? What sounds are we ignoring as just everyday noise right now that elite composers 200 years from now will be rigorously studying and putting into their grandest symphonies without us even realizing it?
The idea that today's dismissed street-cornered beat is tomorrow's classical mega hit is exactly why we do these deep dives. Thank you so much for joining us as we unpack the hidden history of the pastoral. It has been an absolute blast taking this musical journey with you. Keep your ears open, keep questioning the origins of what you hear, and we will see you on the next deep dive.